Yippee-yay, there'll be no wedding bells for today. 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 Today.
Well, look who it is. I bet you thought I was gone for good, but no such luck. Now, I'll be honest, I felt guilty and regretful as hell for not uploading anything in like 2 years. I've neglected all 35,900 of you as if you were red-headed stepchildren, and that's bad, and you have my apologies. I'm really great at getting excited about doing something like a big project and then abandoning it shortly after, and it's a terrible mindset. The Game of Thrones video I was working on, that was scrapped, the Berserk series that was shelved, and the Ornstein story, who knows? It speaks to my profound laziness, and it is not something I'm proud of, but rejoice, I am here and I'm going to try to do my best to make something that doesn't totally suck and to see if you like it. And if you don't like it, well, maybe I'll have Elden Ring or something in the future, but who knows? I'm busy as hell. This has taken me more than 6 months to make, so this is my shot. I've been playing one of my favorite games lately and I want to talk about it. And that game is Nintendogs, Daxons and Friends. Wait, that's not it. It's Fallout New Vegas. Mwah. By the way, that's not to say that Nintendogs, Daxons and Friends can't be your favorite game. I'm just saying, well, this video is about Fallout New Vegas. Deep dive on the Nintendogs series to come soon in 3 years, releasing in 3 years. You've got many examples of unrealized genius in history. Vincent van Gogh, Nikola Tesla, and Ted Kaczynski. Then you've got Fallout New Vegas. You've heard all the stories. Bethesda releases Fallout 3 in October 2008 and makes $300 million within a couple of weeks. A lot of people enjoy it, and Bethesda gets to work on Skyrim shortly afterwards, while at the same time commissioning a sequel to be made by Obsidian, a studio run by several founders of the studio that created Fallout 1 and 2, Black Isle Studios. Now, that's a pretty fucking good idea if you ask me. They get 18 months to make it, which is short as hell, to make a sequel to Fallout 3, but they get it done, more or less. And what happens? Everybody shits on it. Okay, not exactly, but they did get lower review scores across the board and less sales. It was buggy as all fuck, and to this day, I remember a review of this game at the time of launch in which they called it more like a big DLC for Fallout 3. If Obsidian had another 18 months to make this game, it would have been a contender for the best game ever made, and I'm not even joking. It's already a contender for that, and it wasn't even finished. How many games have you seen with a reappraisal section on the Wikipedia page where they say, and I quote, "The glorious comeback of more complex RPG elements. Developer Obsidian fought against a buggy engine and a tight production schedule to turn in an RPG adventure that is all about navigating the possibilities and burdens of player agency in a world where it often feels like you can't properly predict the consequences of your decisions. It's a true role-playing game that takes place in a world you wouldn't want to live in, but can't help but be engrossed by." It only took 11 years, but now New Vegas is finally vindicated. Just imagine how Todd Howard must feel to know that him and his band of buffoons that work for him were absolutely blown the baba booey out by the people who originally created Fallout, minus Tim Kaine and obviously a few others. Now, this video is not to shit all over Bethesda. This video is to talk about my absolute love for this game and to convince any of my audience who have not played it to try it out. It's $15 Australian for the standard edition and I think $30 for the ultimate edition, but it regularly goes on sale, taking the price down to only a few dollars. I know a lot of you might miss my Dark Souls content, and maybe I will do some more in the future along with Elden Ring, but right now I'm a bit of an Alzheimer's patient when it comes to Dark Souls and Bloodborne lore, so stick with me for the moment while we delve into this quiet, unrealized genius of Fallout New Vegas. It's a bit hard for me to put myself back into the shoes of someone who has never played Fallout New Vegas before, given that I've had so many playthroughs over the years, but I'll do my best. By the way, consider there to be spoilers for Fallout 1, 2, 3, 4, and New Vegas all over the shop from here on out if you haven't played it. Just buy it and thank me later. Now, my experiences with the Fallout series began with Fallout 3. There, I said it. I now permit all the old people watching this video to make fun of me for not playing Fallout 1 or 2 first. I remember fondly that I was staying at my older cousin's house in another state. He had gone to work for the day, so of course I nominated to stay home and play his Xbox instead of visiting family like any normal 12-year-old would have done. We had rented Fallout 3 from the Blockbuster down the street, and I proceeded to play for about 10 hours straight until he got home. From that moment on, I was hooked on the story, the world, and the lore of Fallout. It was also new and brown and depressing and totally captivating. I was never allowed to actually own any Fallout games growing up, so that day remained a brief dalliance I had with the series for quite a while. I became a game moocher, borrowing copies of it from my friends, playing it in bits and pieces at people's houses, even at boarding school, playing on someone else's laptop long into the night. Because of this disjointed exposure to the series, I'm not actually sure when I finished my first playthrough of Fallout 3, but it was probably around the time I learned about New Vegas. I probably encountered Fallout New Vegas around 2010 or 2011. I distinctly remember the silhouette and design of the NCR Ranger and tried to play it once or twice, but just could not get into it at the time. My brain was smooth and unformed, unable to comprehend the scope of the work I was looking at. Fallout 3 had conditioned me to walk upon a yellow brick road from one adventure to the next, collecting my little dopamine hits as I marched across a broken wasteland of little moral complexity. I'm not trying to say that Fallout 3 is a bad game, however, being exposed to it at an early age sets yourself up to play these games a certain way and expect certain things. I simply did not get it, despite how much my best friend at the time said how good it was. I wasn't used to things like different ammo types, workbenches, weapon mods. I said, I don't need any of this. Just make me feel like a big dumb hero who everyone loves and wants to be friends with, like I was in Fallout 3. And now I look at myself back then and think,
don't you feel silly? Don't you feel stupid? Don't you feel a little ashamed?
New Vegas was a love letter to RPGs of old, while also making use of the immersive experience that comes with a first-person perspective, and I just wasn't ready to embrace some of that. That all changed when I really started to take New Vegas seriously. I'm hesitant to even do this video because of the sheer scope of New Vegas, and that I haven't spoken much about Fallout in the past, but I'm compelled all the same. It's hard and intimidating to think that I can add something to the slew of other people that have made videos on this game, but by gum, I'm going to try and you're going to listen. And with the introduction out of the way, let's begin. The intro cinematic, in my opinion, captures the feeling and tone of New Vegas very quickly and effectively. The first thing we see is the moon, but it's not the actual moon, it's on a poster, skewed, an advertisement for the Lucky 38. We pan out and we are in the actual Lucky 38, but it's deserted, quiet, with Frank Sinatra's Blue Moon playing echoed in the background. After a shot showing the Las Vegas Strip and the casinos with NCR troops drunk and belligerent, as well as some Securitrons heading toward the Ultra Lux, an NCR Ranger takes aim with an anti-material rifle and fires a shot that kills a fiend way down near the El Rey Motel. We pan out again and see troops hurriedly moving past a red flag with a bull on it, Caesar's Legion. We pan out for the last time to strip a distant landmark on the horizon and see someone being put in a shallow grave by shadowy figures as a man in a checkered suit smokes cigarettes nearby. What do we learn in this minute and 20-second cinematic? Some elements might be hard to pick up at first when you don't know the groups involved, but it actually shows quite a lot. We see an empty casino, the Strip in all of its vice and pre-war glory, the NCR's presence on the Strip, a ranger actually doing the work of protecting the Strip, the Legion gathering, and particular focus on what seems to be a murder taking place far from the Strip. The opening narration by Ron Perlman fills in quite a few of these gaps. Speaking of the vaults, the NCR is a dominant force in the post-war Southwest, and their conflict with a large slave army known as Caesar's Legion for the control of Hoover Dam and by extension the Strip. It also introduces Mr. House, if only by name, as the person solely in control of New Vegas. At the end, it brings the focus down to just one person's perspective, you. A fucking male woman or male man, male person, letter person, what the fuck, a courier. And here we briefly meet the man we later come to know as Benny, as well as some hired guns from the Great Khan tribe. They've ambushed you on your way to deliver a package, a seemingly innocuous poker chip made out of platinum, to the north entrance of the Vegas Strip for a reward of 250 caps. They've dug a grave for you, and after a brief pseudo-apologetic speech from Benny, he draws his pistol and promptly shoots you in the head.
From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
And that's the game. That's the end of the game. End of Fallout New Vegas. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, you're awake to see the gunfire once, but you hear from other places in the game that you were actually double tapped and shot again. The next thing you see after the intro credits is the ceiling in Doc Mitchell's house in Good Springs. I've heard it said that the intro actually gives you too much information, but I don't necessarily feel that way. The first time you watch it, you probably won't retain all the information you hear, at least if you're a intelligent one, dum-dum like me. Besides, the information is not super important anyway. It would be interesting what someone's experience would be like if they played the game to completion without even watching the intro, because not watching the intro apart from the shooting scene would mirror the knowledge of the actual courier, assuming you're role-playing a character that isn't super familiar with the recent happenings in the Mojave Desert. Doc Mitchell is the first NPC you speak with in the game, and he's just really great.
You so fucking precious when you smile.
This dude performs life-saving brain surgery on you after a Securitron with a cowboy personality programmed into him dumped your lifeless body on his doorstep in the middle of the night, and he just does it out of the goodness of his heart and doesn't charge you a cap for it. This seems to show that the post-apocalyptic wasteland doctors are more fair to their patients than some in the world we live in. Also, quick note before you all shit yourselves, some of the mods I'm using may change the appearance of certain NPCs. I'm actually not a fan of every redesign, but I like most of them. To make everyone happy, I'll include a photo of how they're meant to look without mods, just so we're all on the same page. Okay, sounds good. You wake up after being out of consciousness for a few days, and the doctor's medical evaluation of you serves as your character creation segment. You create your character's face using the same Gamebryo style sliders as Fallout 3 and choose your special stats. Special is a system that has remained fairly consistent throughout the series, and each letter stands for a certain attribute. There's strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. This is basically where you begin to build your character the way you want to play them, as you have a number of points to allocate, with each stat starting at 5. Essentially, strength corresponds to your melee damage, carry weight, and weapon strength requirement. Strength requirements are important as each weapon has one, and if you don't meet it, your accuracy is decreased if it is a ranged weapon, and your attacks will be slower if it is a melee weapon, making strength a fairly important universal attribute when it comes to combat. Perception affects how far away you can notice enemies on your compass, and the game contains many perception checks in dialogue that can help in tough situations, but I also have heard from people that it's a dump stat that you shouldn't invest in because the checks don't really matter in the long run. Endurance affects how many hit points you have, your healing rate over time, your poison and radiation resistance, and the number of cyber implants you can have. Charisma, which I thought was the most important special stat in the game when I first began playing, is probably one of the least useful, as it is meant to boost the nerve of your companions, basically meaning that they will have a higher damage resistance, 5% for each level of charisma, but the companions you have in the game are pretty damn tough as it is, and it might only matter if you're playing in hardcore mode, in which they can die, but if you're playing hardcore mode you almost definitely need the stats placed elsewhere anyway. Intelligence is pretty darn important, as it impacts how many skill points you get per level. We will speak about skills shortly, and having an intelligence level of 4 or lower will give you a multitude of new dialogue choices with characters, as if you are actually incredibly stupid. I've never done a low intelligence run before, but from what I've seen they look like a lot of fun. Agility affects action points, which dictates how many skills you can make in VATS, your reload speed and draw holster speed, and finally luck influences your critical hit chance and your luck in casino games like blackjack or roulette, and I think it increases the discovery of certain items. Special basically serves as a high-level intro to character creation prior to moving to skills. Skills are your more refined attributes down to individual proficiencies and allow you to stretch your character's faculties in a multitude of ways. There's barter.
I'd give you $1,500 for it.
Energy weapons. Explosives. Guns. Medicine. Repair. Melee. Sneak. Unarmed. Science.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Speech. Survival. And lockpick. I won't go through all of these, as you can probably work out what most of them do, but they allow a wonderfully deep way to build your character, and is why the original Fallout games use a system which it borrowed from tabletop RPGs. And we're not even finished yet. In addition to special and skills, there's also traits and perks, and I'll also say that different Fallout games like 3 have removed or changed certain things around certain skills and how they work, and I just wanted to say that in case someone mentions it in the comments. Traits were in the original Fallout games, but not included in Fallout 3. In essence, traits give both a positive and negative effect, and you can select up to 2, these being optional. You can see how they would be useful and add more interesting gameplay, like Fast Shot, which increases fire rate by 20% at the cost of 20% accuracy. There are also traits that you might want to take no matter what, like Wild Wasteland. Essentially, Wild Wasteland just adds more content to the game, mostly through cultural or movie references like Monty Python, 20th century science fiction films, and just general silliness. Oh, and aliens too.
Welcome to Earth.
Perks are added every 2 level ups and generally allow a bonus to be selected based on certain special and skill requirements, encouraging you to invest heavily into the skills you're already high in for a compounded sense of reward when those strong skills are made even more effective. I don't want to seem overly pedantic with all this. The point I'm trying to get at is that you are given a veritable matrix of role-playing metrics to work with to create a wholly unique character. This level of role-playing is simply not included mostly nowadays in modern first-person games or RPGs anymore. New Vegas almost perfectly encapsulates the feeling of 90s era isometric RPGs in a first-person 3D format. The thing is, these metrics of character creation used to be par for the course for any sort of RPG that came out prior to the modern era of gaming. That's not to say it doesn't exist anymore, it does, but anyone can see how the systems that helped us really get into these experiences have been dumbed down over time. I'm not a purist when it comes to these things, but I certainly lament the lack of it in modern RPGs. After character creation is complete, before you are even out the door of the first house, there are actually a couple of skill checks you can do for repair and medicine. This is to inform the player immediately that their build choices matter and will for the remainder of the game, and it is this design choice that makes playing New Vegas feel so rewarding. There is nothing more disappointing in a role-playing game to discover that all the time you put into crafting a character was a waste of time, and that the hand of the developer wants to guide you in a direction they think is the best. It implies a lack of trust in the intelligence of the player to make their own way, and a laziness that prevented the development of multiple paths to complete something. Following this, you rob Doc Mitchell blind, because for some reason nothing in his house is owned, so I think most people treat his house as free real estate and take all of his food, but you probably shouldn't from a roleplay perspective unless you're a thieving piece of shit. As you're leaving his house, you speak to him and he gives you his old Pip-Boy, a symbol of the Fallout games that allows you to easily manage and check your stats, health, inventory, quests, and map. Now, it's kind of funny when you think about this because the Pip-Boy should really be considered as a priceless piece of technology in this world, but what are you going to do? It's a video game. Then, you can choose if you want to play on hardcore mode, an optional gameplay modifier that makes healing items work over time instead of instantly, makes ammunition have weight, crippled limbs can only be fixed by using certain items, visiting a doctor or sleeping in certain beds, companions can die and you actually need to eat, drink and sleep in regular intervals. Neglecting these needs adds increasingly negative effects until you drop dead. In my opinion, maybe after you've played through the game at least once without it, hardcore mode is absolutely essential. It adds so much to the experience and it's really not that debilitating. I remember reading the hardcore mode brief when I first played, which made it sound like,
"Warning, this mode is only available if you're not a pussy. You better be ready to start the fucking death, you motherless bastard."
It's not too bad. It makes you plan your journeys with a bit more consideration and makes having a base or player home much more important, as you'll need somewhere to store your gear and ammo between quests. There will also be times when you neglect your H2O meter for too long and before you know it you're running in the middle of the night looking for the closest drink of water while being chased by enemies on the brink of dying from thirst, then diving headfirst into an irradiated toilet and having a big old drink. To stay safe, not only do you have to kill every fiend in a 50-kilometer radius, you also need to drink 6 bottles of Sunset Sarsaparilla every 2 hours to survive a post-apocalyptic desert wasteland. It creates new dimensions to gameplay, and when it comes to perk choices, having something like Lead Belly may be more helpful since you might be drinking and eating a lot more irradiated food than usual. If your desired gameplay experience is to maximize the role-playing elements to their extremes, definitely play with this mode enabled. And if you're a seasoned veteran of this game and you haven't tried it, what's wrong with you? You scared? Gonna piss your pants? Gonna cry? Gonna shit and cum? You leave Doc Mitchell's house and get your first glimpse of the world you'll be playing in. Good Springs is a sleepy little town located in the western side of the Mojave Wasteland. Based on the real-life town of the same name in Nevada, not the last time you'll be hearing that by the way, Good Springs has all the mainstays of an old western town. A saloon, a general store, an old abandoned schoolhouse, and a cowboy robot. Wait, what? One of the first things that should catch your eye is the massive hulking Securitron moseying down the road.
Holy Jesus. What is
Don't
that?
mention it. I'm always ready to lend a helping hand.
This is Victor, voiced by the wonderful William Sadler. Since leaving Doc Mitchell, your only clue to follow so far is the Mojave Express delivery order that Mitchell found on you while rifling through your pockets, pointing you in the direction of Prim, a town that's basically just down the road. You'll notice from this point that you can pretty much ask anyone who's just about anybody about the people who shot you. From the first 2 or 3 people you talk to apart from Sunny Smiles, you'll get a hint to go to Prim from the note, and you get a description of the man who shot you wearing a distinct checkered suit from Trudy, the saloon's owner. Victor is important, however, because it is implied through his dialogue, and I suppose by the fact that you were shot in the head by Bugsy Siegel for an oversized poker chip, that there is more to this routine delivery than meets the eye. The concept of Securitrons is very interesting as well. They're just basically circuitry and wiring, a screen on wheels, but have an unknown number of weapons at their disposal. But the only thing differentiating them from each other are the personality they are encoded with. In Victor's case, the image of a helpful cowboy character pretty much instantly endears you to him, more or less, and assume he's friendly and not a killing machine at the whim of someone else. Now, look, I have some history with H-Bomber Guy. Most memorably me making a pretty crappy response to his Dark Souls 2 video, which then inspired me to do another response which became my most watched video so far. Which is nice, considering my initial response has the most dislikes out of any of my videos.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
He made a pretty good point in his video he made about New Vegas a little while ago when he described Good Springs as a microcosm for the wasteland as a whole, and the culmination of your efforts during the battle for Hoover Dam at the end of the game. After a short tutorial in shooting and survival, you see Trudy having an argument with Joe Cobb, a powder ganger who has recently been part of a takeover of the NCR correctional facility nearby, during which many convicts escaped and have been terrorizing the local area. They attacked a passing Crimson Caravan trader named Ringo, who is holed up in the gas station waiting for the right moment to escape. However, the convicts know Ringo is in the town, and they're ready to kill everyone to find him, unless you intervene. You can actually suggest to Trudy that they ought to just hand over Ringo or outright kill him, but she frowns upon this, and you are reminded that this is more or less a civilized part of the wasteland, and not just an endless desert of rubble and immorality. There is something being built here that does not immediately adhere itself to violence. From here, you are given the opportunity to save Goodsprings by enlisting the help of Sunny Smiles, Easy Pete, Chet, Trudy, and Doc Mitchell. It's not a mandatory requirement for you to convince all of them, but doing so will net some gear and bonuses that will help in the fight. Sunny Smiles will agree straight away. For Chet to help, you'll need at least 25 skill points in your barter skill. If you succeed, he will give you a set of leather armor, which is some decent starting protection, as well as giving the generic Goodsprings settlers leather armor as well. Easy Pete will require a 25 skill check in explosives for his dynamite, of which there are quite a few internet memes about because barely anyone levels up explosives at the start of the game. Trudy will need a speech or sneak check of 25 at least to enlist her help and to boost the number of fighters on your side by 2, and Doc Mitchell will help you out with no skill check requirement because he's just so nice. But you can get additional medical supplies from him if you pass a medicine check of 30. The whole point of this quest, aside from it being a pretty good quest in my opinion, is to show you how your skills can create many interesting choices during quests. I just used the word quest 3 times in a sentence. As you explore out into the wasteland, you will realize that the factions you encounter are, in some ways, similar to the different people you recruit in Goodsprings to help. Winning people over to your side is one of the most rewarding things you can do in this game, and the way in which you do this is one of the best gameplay loops in New Vegas. Also, I don't think I've ever had all the required skills to recruit everyone at once, which always makes me reconsider my skill choices in the next playthrough. You speak to Ringo again to trigger the fight, and then a couple of guys looking for trouble roll into town, so you, along with the townsfolk, blow them to smithereens. Or you side with Joe Cobb and you can kill Ringo for him and then take over the town for the powder gangers, which means you have to kill Doc Mitchell, which is just too evil in my opinion, unless you are really determined to be
a right bad bastard.
But this is what the game is all about, isn't it? Choice, cause and effect, feeling like your actions mean something, and the very first time you are given this choice, it involves either making the powder gangs hate your guts, a small faction, but you might not know that at the time, or killing the man who saved your life and taking part in a massacre. The way that these stakes are constructed is smartly and efficiently done, and this is done continually throughout New Vegas, placing the courier in the center of these situations. I wouldn't say that this necessarily creates a situation where the courier is some hero archetype that has come to provide solutions that nobody else can figure out, but that you can learn and obtain reasons for going down the path you choose, and are not railroaded in a certain direction. This takes a certain amount of hands-off from the developer for them to understand and be cool with the fact that the player should be allowed to have a significant amount of choice with what they want to do, and to see how these choices affect outcomes. I've been thinking about how to structure this video, and at first I was going to have a section where I talk about all the factions one by one, but I felt that might be a little bit tiresome, so instead I'll touch on them as they sort of appear. So here we have the Powder Gangers. Like I might have mentioned already, they're a pretty insignificant group in the broader Mojave, but they serve a role in showcasing cause and effect in the wasteland. NCR troops were moved from the correctional facility to fortify Hoover Dam. Then the riot occurs. Then the convicts steal more dynamite from Sloan and Quarry Junction, which in turn allowed the Death Claws to move in, blocking traffic along the I-15 highway, actions which may then lead to the massacre of the Goodsprings residents. Generally, in games, we like to be able to see the beginning and end result of our actions and how they affect the world around us, but what New Vegas is good at showing us is that it's very common that we may not be able to see the extent of our actions in the long run or even necessarily the short run. While it wasn't our decision to let out the powder gangers, we can see how what might seem like a small bureaucratic action of troop reassignments can have drastic effects on the Mojave Desert. Something else worth mentioning is that after Ghost Town gunfight, the quest in which you defend Goodsprings from the powder gangers, Chet mentions that he is worried about the potential backlash from the powder gangers now that Joe Cobb has been killed, and he's right. You feel like you've done a good deed, stuck your neck out where you thought you needed to and what felt right, but if you don't take care of the powder gangers completely once and for all, you might be setting up the residents of Goodsprings for targeted retribution. Depending on what major faction you align with, Goodsprings may or may not be in the firing line. While it's not likely a location you'll return to in the mid to late game, it's still worth keeping in mind as an important plot device that is always in the back of your brain, and I'm reminded how good it is every time I start a new playthrough. Because of this, I pretty much always head to the NCRCF almost always as a next stop after Goodsprings, which has the story and meta gameplay reasons for going to. It's a large facility with a lot of enemies, but it's not just a dungeon. If you sided with the powder gangers, it's quite easy to get to their leader, Eddie, and get a few more quests for some XP and still wipe them out anyway. It's also likely the first time you'll get to use the disguise mechanic to wear a powder ganger outfit and infiltrate the base. All in all, they make for good target practice and a good way to get some starting loot before continuing on. The reason I'm sort of going on and on about the beginning is because to me, it almost feels more rewarding than some late game choices and consequences. It's the little moments when you're weak and the desert feels so large and unconquerable that you start to feel the power of your choices. Following the trail to Prim, new players are likely to have their first encounter with the NCR, who are camped outside the town of Prim. Something you will start to see a lot in this game is that the NCR encampments are consistently unable to either expand their position, defend their position, or just make the right call. This is normally due to a lack of manpower, and the theme of being stretched too thin across the Mojave is a constant theme. From my memory, Trudy is the first one that might mention it to you. Something that I sort of missed my first time through is that the NCR are more or less an invading force in the Mojave. Even though the Mojave is a dangerous place without the NCR's protection, it also brings its own problems with its singular focus on the Hoover Dam, as does the Legion, obviously. The Hoover Dam is a multifaceted symbol in the Mojave. I think it's worth noting that at the time of the dam's construction, it was hailed as an engineering marvel, providing electricity to millions of homes and power to Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. I will now hold myself back from going on a lengthy tangent on how cool the Colorado River and how the dams work, so you'll have to settle for this little meme clip instead.
You didn't have to cut me off. Think I like it never happened to know we were nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger and I feel so loved.
Over 100 laborers died building the dam, and there is a plaque on the dam that reads, "They died to make the desert bloom," commemorating those who have died. While the dam represented the taming of the Colorado River at the time that it was built, a utilitarian symbol to provide light, water, and power to many, it represents something different in the world of Fallout. This plays into the game's concept of symbolism, but we will talk about that in later detail. The dam now represents different things to different factions, as it was never intended to be an object of war to be fought over. Ulysses, a character that we will spend an inordinate amount of time talking about later, has a quote about this.
"It's the wall by which this age will be measured, the gravestone of the Mojave. Old world, never meant it as such."
For the NCR, it represents the potential for growth for their home state of California and a feather in the cap for Kimball, NCR's president. While the Legion, as far as I know, has no intention of using the dam for its power capabilities. It exists only as a bridge to cross west and to symbolize the Legion's victory over the NCR. If anything, this is the true frontier of Fallout New Vegas. It is the meeting point of civilization and savagery, a two-way mirror where man reflects on its primal self, and the being it aspires to become in reverse. The Mojave armies of the NCR and Legion represent outstretched arms, scratching at each other from hundreds of miles away, each side seeing the other as the barbarian in need of taming. When you first encounter the NCR, you might just assume, oh, these are the good guys, just as you encountered the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 3. You might think, even if you do understand the bungle they had with the NCRCF, yep, These guys are the safe bet to go with. I don't expect to run into any messy choices with this bunch. In actuality, you will, quite a lot. Since the NCR is a major faction, I'll try not to do a massive commentary on them right now, but we'll break it up into smaller chunks as I move through. What I think is needed to know at this point is that when the game starts, the NCR have been in the Mojave in some capacity for 8 years, since 2273. What has been achieved during this time, you may ask? Essentially a stalemate, as the intro cinematic depicted. In 2277, Caesar's forces, led by their legate or top field commander, launched an assault in an attempt to capture the dam and advance into the Mojave proper. They were not successful and were repelled back to the eastern side of the dam, and NCR have been unable to mass enough momentum to take the fight to Caesar, resulting in the NCR barely holding onto the dam, and their enemies continued to grow in strength, ready to wash over the Mojave in a red tide. I really like how the first time you talk to the NCR, they're like, yeah, I don't really know who you are or what you want, but if you want to go into Prim, you can, I guess, but you'll probably die because a bunch of convicts took over the town. They don't ask for your help because they don't know who you are. You are just someone that's just walked up to Prim. They have no reason to think that you are of any help, which is basically what an RPG would generally ask of you. They'd ask you to, help us take over the town, but New Vegas is different. You already have your reasons to go there and they can't stop you. They simply just don't care who you are.
I don't know you and I don't care to know you.
Prim is a pretty big step up in understanding the combat in New Vegas, since you really don't have anyone backing you up like you did in Good Springs. You're all by yourself with just the equipment you found so far, probably a 9mm pistol, a varmint rifle, and if you're lucky, a 357 Magnum or Colt single-action army.
This is the greatest handgun ever made. The Colt single-action army. 6 bullets, more than enough to kill anything that moves.
You might have a few rusty knives as well, and this might be a good time to talk about the combat system. New Vegas brought a lot over from Fallout 3, inheriting the Gamebryo engine, game assets and files, and most elements relating to combat. Now, you should know that along with the 18 short months Obsidian had to make their game, they also had to learn on the fly how to use this engine, which contributed to a large amount of bugs, glitches, and instability at launch. Having said that, Obsidian did make quite a few noticeable changes to gunplay and combat to make it feel better than it did in Fallout 3, which was very welcome in my opinion. They added an actual aim down sights functionality instead of the weird zoom feature, added various different types of ammunition, with New Vegas having 14 different bullet types, with each of those bullets having from 3 all the way up to 10 different subtypes like armor piercing, hollow points, incendiary, and many others. Now, a common thing I will hear is that people don't like New Vegas's gunplay, that it feels janky, it feels off, blah blah blah. Now, I know what you're saying, but
you're wrong, and you're a grotesquely ugly freak. Thanks.
In all seriousness, I get what you mean. New Vegas, especially unmodded, vanilla, day one New Vegas, does not always behave the way you want it to, and gunplay can feel frustrating sometimes, but even in this state, the jankiness is somewhat endearing. Something about the way enemies fight you, their angry faces, the physics, and the dismemberment is all charming. It was an element of its time, and it might take some getting used to, but I really love the combat in this game. As your skills get better and your equipment improves, there's a lot of fun to be had here. What Bethesda created with Fallout 3 came out around the same time as games like COD World at War and Left 4 Dead 2, games with violence that really shook up the market. It was entertaining, but it was also a little bit shocking sometimes, but as we know, war never changes, am I right? Please don't click the dislike button, please stop. In Prim, you find a dead courier named Daniel Wyand outside the Mojave Express office. Not much is known about him other than the fact that he was courier number 4 and you were courier number 6. Victor was the one to put in the 6 different orders, but only you held the true package, the platinum chip you saw Benny take from you. You learn from Johnson Nash, the guy that runs the office in Prim, that the other couriers were all carrying little pieces of what seemed to be random junk like fuzzy dice or chess pieces, and all the others even completed their deliveries and received payment. You were the only dumbass who managed to get killed by Matthew Perry. Daniel Wyand had the luxury of being killed by some drugged up convict, probably. Nash also mentions that there was another dude who was meant to take your spot, but when this unnamed man saw your name, even if it was Captain Willie Slonker or something like that, recognizes you and rejects the job, allowing you to take the doomed package instead. I'll admit, I wasn't really sure what this was meant to mean way back when I first played, but it is referencing Ulysses, the character I mentioned before that we'll talk a lot about as we start talking about Lonesome Road, the final DLC for New Vegas. The reason I mention this is that this line of dialogue would have had to have been written way before Lonesome Road was released, which was released about a year after the main game became available. The foreshadowing and the way that this main game interacts with its DLCs is very impressive, and this is one of the first of many other examples that we could look at. Nash also says he hopes a place called The Divide skins this mysterious person alive, which should actually be taken quite literally. You're tasked by Nash to rescue Deputy Beagle from the Bison Steve, a rundown old casino where the convicts have fortified themselves. Now, I'm not going to mention the ins and outs of every quest and location in this game, but I always enjoy the Bison Steve. It's a fun little location that starts to make you see how your skills matter outside the tutorial, as there are quite a few hard lockpick checks here that you are likely not going to be able to do yet, but gives you a reason to come back later if you want. You can sneak around to try and take out the convicts stealthily, or in whatever manner you see fit. New Vegas is not a challenging game really, as long as you make sure your character is not a wet noodle when it comes to any sort of combat or conflict resolution, but it is really open. This I think is probably a step up on the older Fallout games, which have been accused of perhaps being overly difficult for newcomers who have a very little understanding of those 90s era RPGs before real-time combat was a thing, and the importance of action points and all that jazz. But let me just say, Fallout 1 is not that hard either. I'm not saying that New Vegas makes it baby mode necessarily, but it does make it fun at least. Fun baby mode, if you will. Once you rescue Deputy Beagle, or not, since the following answers are on a journal he has as well, he tells you that Benny and the Great Khan stopped in Prim and mentioned going to Nipton and then Novak, 2 more settlements to the northeast. Before we leave Prim, we may also run across perhaps the first companion in the game that you can meet, EDE, or Eddie, an Enclave Eyebot. Specifically, Eyebot Duraframe Subject E is found inactive on Johnson Nash's table inside the Mojave Express office. Making EDE operational is fairly straightforward with a repair skill check, a mix of science and repair, or by using spare parts. If New Vegas's exploration is a big old bowl of spaghetti, then the companions are the meatballs, the little nuggets of goodness that make running all over the Mojave a joy. There are 8 companions in total in the game. 5 of them humans, 1 a super mutant, another a cyber puppy dog, and 1 a robot, EDE. Each of them have a significant number of voice lines, a special quest you can do, and a unique fighting style and even perks that you can get by traveling with them. They all have unique personalities and double as a second inventory for you if you are running out of carrying capacity. All in all, they are incredibly useful and add a ton of enjoyment to the game. They are unique NPCs in the sense that their perceptions and opinions of the world around them will change and react based on your actions. One of them specifically can get a little judgmental and on your nerves over time if you steal too much stuff or side with a roaming band of slavers.
You and me were done traveling together. I want nothing more to do with you. I thought there was a chance you'd change. Not any longer. Being a fucker is who you are.
I got some jelly beans.
You can have your shit back. I don't need it or want it.
This is probably a good time to highlight the voice acting talent on display as well, not only for the companions but for the game in general. Vegas has an incredible amount of well-known voice actors on display. You've got Matt Perry, Wayne Newton, Chris Christopherson, Ron Perlman, Zachary Levi, William Sadler, Renee Auberjonois, Danny Trejo, John Doman, Alex Rocco, Felicia Day, and many more. Unfortunately, a lot of the normal, non-special NPCs are voiced by only a handful of people, meaning you'll speak to many characters and they all have the same voice. But considering how much dialogue there is in this game to begin with, it's sort of understandable. Fine, you think I'm being too praiseworthy of New Vegas? It's a bad part of the game, alright? I hate it. It sucks. Normally, you can only have one companion or one human plus one non-human, and this is the right idea considering how overpowered they can be in non-hardcore mode. In normal mode, if a companion gets to 0 health, they get knocked unconscious until all enemies in the immediate area are dead. But if you're playing in hardcore and they reach 0 health, they're dead for good, and unless you load a previous save, like a coward, something else worth mentioning is basically each companion is or was aligned with some kind of faction, so they almost become a rep for that faction while you walk around with them for better or worse, and this affiliation will also impact how they see the world. Arcade is with the followers of the Apocalypse, so he will try to get you to see the humanitarian side of things, but was born into a group with a more darkened history, which we will talk about later. Veronica is with the Brotherhood of Steel, so she will be somewhat naive in the Greater Wasteland, happy to go along with whatever as long as it doesn't necessarily hurt the Brotherhood. Boone is an ex-NCR First Recon sniper, so if your reputation with the NCR is anything less than neutral, he won't really want anything to do with you. But yeah, companions are fucking great. Love them. And if you don't love them, you can just shoot them in the head. On the way from Prim to Nipton, your attention might be caught by the giant statues of some dudes shaking hands up on a hill to the southwest. What you're looking at is the entrance to the Mojave Outpost, the NCR's entrance point into the Mojave from California along the long 15 highway. The long 15 highway. I'm gonna fucking lose it. Now, strap in children, because this video will contain discussion of government-built roads and highways. Basically, while you are playing a first/third-person post-apocalyptic role-playing action-adventure game, the NCR government is playing a 90s era MS-DOS strategy game. They're playing motherfucking Settlers from 1993, and what I mean by that is basically the NCR is constantly fighting the Legion and Raiders for control of highways and roads to facilitate trade for prospectors from the NCR as well as caravans. Can we just appreciate for a moment that Obsidian looked at the road system of Nevada and planned out how trade routes would affect economics and tensions between the factions? Who knew that would add so much to the narrative? Well, George Lucas knew that as well when he made The Phantom Menace, but you aren't ready for that conversation yet.
Of me when you are all alone. Maybe the one who is waiting for you will prove untrue. Then what will